At 11 o'clock on a December night, I found my grandson locked in the unheated garage, his lips blue from the cold. While inside the house, I could hear my daughter-in-law and her family laughing over champagne. The security gate opened slowly as I pressed the code my grandson had given me months ago, back when things were still good. Back when I believed Victoria truly loved him. The driveway was packed with expensive cars. Mercedes, BMWs, a Porsche, a Christmas party. The house glowed with warm lights, and through the front windows I could see people in cocktail attire, glasses raised, celebrating something. But Daniel's car was parked outside the closed garage door, covered in frost. Something was wrong. I walked around to the side door of the garage and tried the handle. Locked. Then I heard a faint tapping from inside. Weak, rhythmic, desperate. "Daniel?" I called out. The tapping grew frantic. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and called him. Through the garage door, I heard his ringtone, that old jazz tune he loved. It rang and rang. No answer. The tapping continued. I ran to the front door and rang the bell. A young woman in a catering uniform opened it, and the sound of laughter and music poured out. I pushed past her. "Excuse me, ma'am. You can't. I'm looking for Victoria Hayes," I said, my voice sharp enough to cut through the noise. The conversations nearby stopped. Heads turned. Victoria appeared from the living room, wearing a red designer dress that probably cost more than my mortgage payment. Her smile was perfect, practiced. "Margaret. What a surprise. We weren't expecting you. Where is Daniel?" Her smile didn't waver. "Oh, Daniel wasn't feeling well. He's resting. He's locked in the garage." The room went silent. Someone turned off the music. Victoria's mother, Patricia, emerged from the crowd, her expression ice cold. "Margaret, I think you've had too much to drink. This is a private party. I haven't had anything to drink. And my grandson is locked in your garage in 30-degree weather. Open it. Now." Victoria glanced at her father, Richard, who stood by the fireplace with a drink in his hand. He shrugged. "The boy was being difficult," he said casually, making a scene during our celebration. "We gave him some time to cool off and think about his behavior." Cool off. In an unheated garage, in winter. I felt something inside me that I hadn't felt since my days in the ER, that cold, focused fury that comes when you see someone's life hanging by a thread and you're the only one who can save them. "Open the garage," I said quietly. "Or I call 911 right now and report a hostage situation." Richard laughed. "Hostage? He's my son-in-law. This is a family matter. He's been locked in there for over an hour in freezing temperatures. That's not a family matter. That's assault." I pulled out my phone. Victoria's smile finally cracked. "Margaret, you're overreacting." I dialed. The 911 operator answered. 911, what's your emergency?" "I need police and ambulance at 4782 Windermere Road in Seattle. My grandson has been locked in an unheated garage." All right, Victoria snapped. She grabbed keys from the entry table and stalked toward the garage door. I followed, keeping the 911 operator on the line. When the garage door opened, I saw him. Daniel sat on the concrete floor, his back against his car, his arms wrapped around himself. His face was pale, his lips had a bluish tint, and he was shivering so violently he could barely move. He looked up at me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Defeat. Complete, utter defeat. "Officers are on their way," the 911 operator said in my ear. I knelt beside Daniel, immediately checking his pulse, weak but steady, and his temperature. Hypothermia. Early stages. I told the operator his condition while I wrapped my coat around him. "Grandma," he whispered. "I'm sorry, I should have just shut up. You have nothing to be sorry for." I helped him to his feet. He could barely stand. "Let's get you to the car." Victoria stood in the doorway, arms crossed. He was being disrespectful to my father. He needed to learn. He needed to learn what? That you'd let him freeze to death? I turned to her, and I spoke the 7 words that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. "This marriage is over, and you will pay." She laughed. Actually laughed. "You have no idea who you're threatening, Margaret. My family has connections. Your family just committed assault and false imprisonment in front of 20 witnesses. And I was an ER surgeon for 35 years. I know exactly what constitutes medical neglect and abuse. The sirens were already approaching. Let me go back to the beginning, to when I first met Victoria. It was 2 years ago, at Daniel's graduation from University of Washington. He was getting his master's in environmental engineering, my brilliant, gentle grandson who wanted to save the world. Victoria was there with her parents, already acting like she owned him. I remember thinking she was beautiful, poised, confident. I also remember the way she touched his arm, the way she steered him away from conversations, the way she answered questions directed at him. Warning signs. I missed them. I was too happy that Daniel had found someone, too relieved that he wasn't alone anymore. After his father, my son died in a car accident when Daniel was 15, and his mother passed from cancer just a year later. I'd raised him. He'd been through so much loss. When he smiled at Victoria, I thought, finally, he has someone. I should have looked closer. The wedding was 6 months later. Extravagant, expensive, entirely planned by Victoria's family. Daniel barely made any decisions about his own wedding. Victoria's mother is just really particular, he'd explained. It's easier to let her handle it. Easier. That word should have alarmed me. After the wedding, the changes came gradually. First, Daniel stopped coming to our weekly dinners. Victoria's family has events, he'd say apologetically. Then he missed my birthday. Then Thanksgiving. Each time it was Victoria's family needing something. Victoria's father had business associates to entertain. Victoria's mother had charity galas. When I did see Daniel, he looked tired, thinner. He'd started losing that spark in his eyes. Are you happy? I asked him once, about a year into the marriage. He paused too long before answering. Yes, of course. Victoria's great. Her family's been very generous. Generous. They'd bought Daniel and Victoria a house in Victoria's name only. They'd gotten Daniel a job at Richard's company where Richard could monitor his every move. They'd surrounded him with their people, their world, their control. I was a surgeon. I'd seen patterns of abuse before, but seeing it and recognizing it in your own family are two different things. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself Daniel was an adult who could make his own choices. I was wrong. The night I found him in the garage. Here's what had happened. Daniel's mother's best friend, Mary, one of the few connections he still had to his past, had called him. She was in hospice, dying. She wanted to say goodbye. Daniel took the call during Victoria's father's birthday party. He stepped away for 10 minutes to talk to a dying woman who'd been like an aunt to him. When he came back, his eyes were red. Victoria's father noticed. Are you crying at my birthday party? Richard had demanded. I just got difficult news. You're being selfish and dramatic. You're ruining the celebration. Daniel tried to explain about Mary. Victoria cut him off. This is exactly the problem with you, Daniel. You're always dwelling on the past. Your mother is gone. You need to move on and focus on your real family now. My family. When Daniel protested, when he dared to say that Mary mattered to him, that 10 minutes of kindness wasn't too much to ask, Richard decided Daniel needed time to think about his priorities. They took his phone, led him to the garage, and locked the door. That's when he'd used the small emergency button on his car key to silently alert me, a feature I'd insisted he keep programmed after his mother died, just in case he ever needed help. The police arrived within minutes that night. The paramedics checked Daniel's temperature just 2 degrees above hypothermia. If I'd arrived an hour later, he could have died. Victoria's family had their lawyer there within the hour. A smooth man in an expensive suit who explained that this was all a misunderstanding and family drama being blown out of proportion. But I'd kept the 911 operator on the line. Everything was recorded. The paramedics documented Daniel's physical state. The police took statements from several party guests who'd overheard the arguments. And I'd taken photos of the garage, no heater, no blankets, the thermostat showing 34 degrees. At the hospital, while Daniel was being treated for mild hypothermia, he finally told me everything. The verbal abuse, the isolation from friends, the control over finances. Daniel's paychecks went into a joint account that only Victoria could access. The gaslighting, telling him he was too sensitive, too emotional, too weak. The threats. If you ever leave me, my father will destroy your career. You'll never work in this city again. And the physical abuse. Yes, that too. Victoria had thrown things at him, shoved him. Once she'd locked him out of the house overnight in the rain because he'd forgotten to pick up her dry cleaning. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, holding his hand. He looked away. Because I was ashamed. Because everyone sees Victoria's family as perfect. Because no one would believe that I, a man, was being abused by my wife. Because I thought maybe they were right. Maybe I was too sensitive. Too weak. That's when I knew what I had to do. I'd spent 35 years in emergency rooms. I'd seen domestic violence victims of every age, gender, and background. I'd learned that the most dangerous time for a victim is when they try to leave. I'd also learned that abusers with money and power are the hardest to hold accountable. But I'd never lost a patient without a fight. And I wasn't about to lose my grandson now. The next morning, I hired Natalie Chen, one of the best family law attorneys in Seattle. She specialized in high-net-worth divorces and domestic abuse cases. Here's what we're up against, Natalie told me in her office downtown. The Hayes family has money, connections, and a reputation to protect. They'll argue that Daniel is making this up for financial gain in the divorce. They'll paint him as unstable, vindictive, someone trying to destroy a good family's name. What do we need? Evidence. Lots of it. And we need to move fast before they can prepare a counter-narrative. We started documenting everything. Medical records from the hospital showing hypothermia. Photos of bruises Daniel had been hiding under long sleeves. Bank statements showing financial control. Text messages where Victoria berated him, called him worthless, threatened him. But we needed more. That's when Emily reached out. Emily Chen was Victoria's personal assistant, a young woman in her 20s who'd been working for Victoria for 6 months. She called my home number 3 days after the garage incident. Mrs. Hayes? Margaret Hayes? Yes? My name is Emily. I work for Victoria. I need to talk to you, but not on this phone. We met at a coffee shop in Fremont, far from the Hayes family's usual haunts. Emily looked terrified. I could lose my job for this, she said, hands wrapped around her coffee cup. Worse. Mr. Hayes has destroyed people's careers for less. Why are you here, Emily? She pulled out her phone. Because what they did to Daniel. I've been watching it happen for months, and I can't stay silent anymore. I have something you need to see. The Hayes house, like many wealthy homes in Seattle, had a smart home system. Cameras, microphones, all connected through an app. Victoria used it to monitor the house when she traveled. Emily had access to that system as part of her job, and she'd been quietly downloading footage for months. Footage that showed Victoria screaming at Daniel, throwing objects at him, shoving him against walls. Footage from the night of the party, showing Richard and Victoria's brother dragging Daniel to the garage while he protested. Footage of Victoria's mother saying, "Leave him out there all night. He needs to learn his place." "This is enough evidence to bury them," Natalie said when I showed her. "But we have a problem. This footage was obtained without their knowledge. It might not be admissible in court." "There has to be a way," I said. Natalie thought for a moment. "Emily recorded this as part of her normal job duties, correct? As Victoria's assistant, she had legitimate access to the security system. If she witnessed abuse and preserved evidence of it, that could be argued as whistleblower protection. We filed for divorce and a restraining order on Daniel's behalf. We also filed a police report for assault and false imprisonment. The Hayes family responded exactly as we'd expected. Their lawyers filed a countersuit claiming Daniel was emotionally unstable, that he was lying about the abuse, that he was trying to extort money from them. Richard gave an interview to a local business publication, painting himself as a generous father-in-law whose kindness had been exploited by a troubled young man. Victoria's lawyer was a shark named Gordon Price, known for destroying opponents in court. At a pre-trial hearing, he addressed me directly. "Mrs. Hayes, I understand you're trying to protect your grandson, but making false accusations against a prominent family won't help him. It'll only expose him to defamation lawsuits. If Daniel drops this circus now, my clients are willing to offer a generous settlement." "No," Daniel said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. He stood up, his voice stronger now. "No settlement. I want this in public record. I want other people in my situation to know they're not alone, that they're not weak. That abuse is abuse, regardless of gender." Gordon smirked. "Very noble. Also very stupid. You have no evidence." "Actually," Natalie said. "We do." She presented the smart home footage. All of it. Months of verbal abuse, physical assault, emotional torture. The courtroom watched in silence as Victoria screamed at Daniel, as her family discussed how to break him down, as Richard laughed about making Daniel sleep in the garage. Gordon objected, of course. This evidence was obtained illegally. It's inadmissible. But the judge, a woman in her 60s named Susan Park, reviewed the documentation Emily had provided about her job duties and whistleblower protections. After a long deliberation, she ruled, the footage was obtained by an employee with legitimate access who witnessed potential criminal activity and preserved evidence. It's admissible. Continue, Miss. Chend. The trial lasted 3 days. Victoria's family brought character witnesses who praised their generosity, their philanthropy, their standing in the community. But the footage didn't lie. You could see it, hear it, feel the cruelty. Daniel testified about the isolation, the control, the systematic breaking down of his spirit. He cried on the stand, something Gordon tried to use against him. See how emotionally unstable he is. But Judge Park shut that down immediately. Mr. Price, if someone showing emotion while describing abuse is evidence of instability, then you've fundamentally misunderstood how trauma works. Save your victim blaming for someone else's courtroom. I loved Judge Park. On the final day, I took the stand as well. I described finding Daniel in the garage, his physical condition, what hypothermia does to the human body. I spoke with the authority of 3 decades in emergency medicine. I made it clear, Daniel could have died that night. When I stepped down, I looked directly at Victoria's family. They stared back with hatred. I'd made powerful enemies. I didn't care. The verdict came down in Daniel's favor. The divorce was granted. The restraining order was issued. Victoria and her family had to stay at least 500 feet away from Daniel. The judge awarded Daniel a significant settlement for emotional distress and the return of all marital assets purchased with his income. And there were criminal charges. Victoria pleaded guilty to assault to avoid jail time, receiving probation and mandatory anger management. Richard was charged with false imprisonment. His business reputation took a hit that no PR firm could repair. But for me, the real victory came a few weeks later. I received a message through the court from Gordon Price's office. Emily, Victoria's former assistant, had quit her job the day after the trial. She'd been unable to find new employment. Richard had used his connections to blacklist her throughout Seattle's business community, but other families had reached out to her. Other people trapped in abusive situations with powerful spouses. Emily was starting a non-profit to help domestic violence survivors navigate the legal system, gather evidence safely, and find attorneys who would take on wealthy abusers. She wanted to name it Daniel's Garage Project. Daniel cried when I told him. Good tears for once. 6 months after the trial, Daniel moved into a small apartment in Capitol Hill. He'd found a new job with an environmental non-profit, smaller salary than Richard's company, but work he actually believed in. He was in therapy, working through the trauma. Some days were harder than others, but he was healing. One evening I visited him for dinner. He'd cooked nothing fancy, just pasta and salad, but he was smiling. Really smiling, not the fake smile I'd seen during his marriage. Mary passed away last week, he said softly. I got to video call with her before the end. She told me she was proud of me for getting out. She was right to be proud. I keep thinking, if I'd just stayed quiet that night, if I hadn't taken her call, if I'd just done what they wanted, then you'd be dead, I said flatly. Maybe not that night, maybe not that year, but eventually, Daniel, they would have broken something in you that couldn't be fixed. You did the right thing. He nodded, but I could see he was still processing it. That's the thing about abuse, it doesn't end when you escape. The healing takes time. There's someone I want you to meet, he said, changing the subject. Her name is Aisha. She works at the non-profit with me. We've been talking. I saw the nervousness in his eyes, the fear that I'd judge him for moving on too quickly. I'd love to meet her, I said simply. Aisha came over for coffee the next week. She was kind, smart, passionate about her work in environmental justice. She laughed easily and listened carefully. When Daniel talked, she didn't interrupt him or correct him or make him feel small. She just listened. And when he finished, she shared her own thoughts, treating his opinions as if they mattered. What a concept. Treating your partner as if they mattered. They took things slowly. Daniel was cautious now, more aware of red flags. But over the months, I watched him bloom again. He started painting something he'd loved as a teenager, but had given up during his marriage because Victoria said it was a waste of time. He reconnected with old friends. He laughed more. A year after the trial, I attended Daniel's commitment ceremony to Aisha at a small venue on Puget Sound. It was nothing like his first wedding, no excessive flowers, no hundreds of guests, no parents controlling every detail. Just 50 people who genuinely loved them, watching them promise to be partners, not possessions. When Daniel asked me to say a few words, I stood up and looked at all those faces. I spent my career in emergency rooms, I began. I learned that the most important thing in a crisis isn't having all the answers. It's refusing to stay silent when something's wrong. It's speaking up even when your voice shakes. It's being willing to kick down a door literally or figuratively to save someone you love. I looked at Daniel and Aisha, but I also learned this. Survival isn't the same as living. Getting out of danger is just the first step. The real healing comes after, when you learn to trust again, to love again, to believe you deserve kindness. My voice caught a little. Daniel, I'm so proud of you, not just for leaving, but for doing the hard work of healing, for being brave enough to love again. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. After the ceremony, Emily found me by the water. Daniel's garage project had helped 32 people in its first year. She'd built a network of attorneys, therapists, and safe houses. She'd created protocols for gathering evidence safely. She'd even lobbied the state legislature for better protections for domestic violence survivors. I wanted to thank you, she said. If you hadn't taken that case seriously, if you hadn't fought back against the Hayes family, I never would have had the courage to speak up. You saved Daniel's life, I told her. That footage you provided. You saved his life, she corrected. You showed up that night. You called 911. You refused to let them gaslight you into thinking it was normal. That's what saved him. Maybe we both did. Maybe that's how it works. We save each other. 2 years after that night in the garage, I received an invitation to speak at a domestic violence awareness event in Seattle. The organizers wanted me to talk about elder advocates helping abuse survivors, about how family members can recognize and respond to abuse. I almost declined. I'm not a public speaker. I'm a retired surgeon who just wanted to protect her grandson. But then I thought about all the people sitting in their own versions of that garage right now, locked away, freezing, convinced they deserve it, convinced no one will believe them, convinced they're too weak to fight back. So I accepted. At the event, I told Daniel's story. With his permission. I talked about warning signs, about how abuse often starts with small controls, financial, social, emotional, before escalating to physical violence. I talked about how gender doesn't determine victimhood, how anyone can be abused, how power and money don't make someone immune from being a victim or from being an abuser. But mostly, I talked about this. The silence of good people is how abuse continues. Every time we see something wrong and tell ourselves it's not our business or they seem happy or surely they'd leave if it were really that bad, we become complicit. Standing up doesn't mean having all the answers. It doesn't mean being fearless. It means showing up anyway. It means making the call, kicking down the door, refusing to pretend everything's fine when someone's dying right in front of you. After my speech, a young woman approached me. She was shaking. My sister, she whispered. Her husband. I think he's hurting her. But she keeps saying everything's fine, and he's so charming, and everyone loves them as a couple. I don't know what to do. I took her hand. Listen to your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Let her know you're there, that you believe her, that you'll help her when she's ready. And document everything you can, because when she does reach out, you'll need evidence. I gave her Emily's card. That's the thing about that night in the garage. It didn't just save Daniel. It created a ripple. Emily started her nonprofit. Daniel shared his story publicly, helping other male survivors feel less alone. I learned that my career as a healer didn't end when I retired from medicine, it just took a different form. And the Hayes family? Richard's business never fully recovered from the scandal. Several other employees came forward with stories of his abusive management style, leading to more lawsuits. Victoria moved to California, married again. I hope she got help. Though I doubt it. Some people never learn. But that's not my concern anymore. Last month, Daniel and Aisha told me they're expecting a baby. A little girl. They want to name her Mary. after the woman who made that phone call whose death became a turning point. When Daniel told me, he added, "And we want you to be in her life as much as possible, Grandma. We want her to grow up knowing that family means protecting each other, not controlling each other. We want her to know that if she's ever in trouble, she can call you, and you'll kick down whatever door you need to kick down." I held my grandson's face in my hands. "I'll always show up," I promised, "just like you showed up for yourself that night. You're the one who pressed that emergency button. You're the one who decided to live. I just drove the getaway car." He laughed through tears. "These days, when I drive past that house on Windermere Road, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel something else. Gratitude. Gratitude that I got there in time. Gratitude that Daniel survived. Gratitude for Emily's courage, Natalie's skill, Judge Park's wisdom. And I feel hope. Hope for all the people still locked in their garages, literal or metaphorical. Hope that someone will show up for them. Hope that they'll find the strength to press their own emergency buttons. If there's one thing I want people to take from this story, it's this. You don't have to be a lawyer or a surgeon or anyone special to save a life. You just have to be willing to see what's really happening, believe what you're seeing, and refuse to walk away. That December night, when I heard that faint tapping from inside the garage, I could have convinced myself I was imagining it. I could have told myself Daniel was an adult who could handle his own problems. I could have worried about making a scene or offending Victoria's family or overstepping boundaries. Instead, I kicked down a door. And that made all the difference. The storm has passed now. After the darkness, there is always light, but the light doesn't come by itself. Someone has to be brave enough to flip the switch, to call for help, to refuse to accept that the darkness is normal. Be that person. For someone you love, or for a stranger, or for yourself. Because somewhere, right now, someone is locked in a garage, and they're waiting for someone to hear them tapping, to believe them, to show up. Will it be you?